Now the podcast starts.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome to the podcast on which we talk about horror. Sometimes we talk about other things, and sometimes we do swear. I am your co-host, Dan, sometimes known as TD Velasquez, under which I've been known to write about movies and stuff. And today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by the brilliant film lecturer, Dr. Stella Gaynor. Hello, Stella, how are you doing?
Hi, Dan. I'm not sure about being prefaced by brilliant, to be honest. Startlingly mediocre.
Well, we all have good days and bad days. Speaking of which, what's your favourite thing today?
In horror?
In horror or otherwise that's on your mind?
Do you know what? My favourite thing today is American Horror Story is 13 years old today.
Wow.
I know.
Right.
I can't. I can't believe it's been that long since the first episode of Murder House. But I'm also like, Jesus Christ, 13 years. Oh my God.
Yes, it's flashed past.
It really
so it
has.
started in. I thought it started in 2012. So was it 2011 then?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It was pretty much a year, give or take, 3 weeks after The Walking Dead first started.
Right. Okay.
So Walking did really well, and FX, the channel that American Horror Story was on, they were like, yeah, go on, we'll have some of that.
Yep.
Got on the case with making American Horror Story. So yeah, 13 years old today.
I still need to watch American Horror Story Hotel. That was your big recommendation of the one series to choose. And it is all on Disney Plus now, I think, the whole series. So there's no excuse for me not to watch it. And there's no excuse for the listeners to not try it out either. I have to say, I did try one episode of American Horror Stories, which I thought would be more up my street because I like short horror stories. But the one I watched wasn't great.
Which one?
It was the one that had Billy Leward in.
She's in a lot of them.
Oh, is she? Right, okay.
Yeah, she's in a few. What was going on in the story?
Oh, gosh.
Because the shorter ones, there was the Aliens one, the one that's all in black and white.
No, she was a high schooler planning to murder her parents, I think. Something like that. It's a long time ago.
Sounds like something she might do.
Right, well.
Yeah, God. So the thing, I know I've said this on here before, but the thing with the American Horror Story is because it's been going for 13 years, and because there's so much of it, it's not, it doesn't hit the mark every time. And if you ask people about it who are fans, they'll all have a different favourite and a different worst series or season. So,
sure.
they've put in that because it recycles over time and it starts again with a new story. If you don't like one series, then just hang on and the next one will come round and it'll be, might be more to your taste.
Now, like I say, I understand that the one I did watch all the way through was Roanoke, which was the one that you told me not to watch.
Yeah.
But I didn't listen to you and I should have.
Just went anyway.
Yeah. So,
yeah, it's not great, that one. But, Hotel's great, Cult is great. I really liked the third one, Coven with the witches, and then when the witches come back in Apocalypse, that's good. So yeah, most of it I do really enjoy, but there are some bits that I'm just like, oh no, I don't want to watch that one again.
Right.
But yeah,
Okay.
happy 13th birthday to American Horror Story.
Yes. Well done, Ryan Murphy, part of the reinvention of horror on TV.
Sure.
So, good stuff. Okay, let's talk about the topic for this episode then, Stella. Last week, you and I had the privilege, when we record, I'm saying it's last week. When this goes out, who knows? It might be a couple of months down the line. But we've just been to Grimmfest, which was on in Manchester in early October, as it always is. This year, we only went for one day. We didn't really go for a whole day, to be honest. We had a lovely time. And we saw two films, and your friend Craig was with us. And to be honest, we may have spent a little more time in the pub with Craig than we did watching movies.
Yeah,
but we did see two films, and we'll talk about those today. They're brand new films, so we won't go into spoilerish detail. But there are plenty we can say about both, I think. The first film we saw is called Crumb, Crumbcatcher begins at the awkwardly glamorous wedding of Shane and Leah, a young couple connected to the New York literary scene. He's written a book about ghetto life, and her family are publishing it. Soon they drive upstate to spend their unconventional honeymoon in a plush, remote country house owned by Leah's rich relatives. But their time together is interrupted by unexpected visitors, and events take several very unpredictable turns. Have a listen to the trailer for Chris Skotchdopole's blackly comic Crumbcatcher.
Now I want you to take a journey together. A journey into the future.
Jay? There's a car in the driveway.
What do you mean?
There's a car in the driveway.
Oh, hey guys! John Spinelli from Crystal Views. Wow, look at this. Now that is interesting. I'm actually something of an artist myself. I'm an inventor and an entrepreneur with a groundbreaking product. This thing will knock your socks off.
30 seconds. I'm calling the police.
Talk to you for a second.
Oh, I think you're really gonna love this, pal.
How did you get the address?
You two need to leave right now.
Bingo, bongo, up the Congo. Yeah, that's right, Freddy boy.
What's going on out there? Why are you letting this guy walk right over you?
I want you to take a journey together. A journey into the future. So who wants to try first?
So this movie, Stella, going into it, I knew nothing about it apart from the title Crumbcatcher, which is, not the most explanatory title, and I don't think we should even explain what it means, because that's part of the fun of the movie, is not quite knowing where it's going. I would say that when you do find out in the movie what Crumbcatcher means, it's not a disappointment, but it's also almost certainly not what you were expecting. It's quite funny. I was incredibly tense for the first half of this movie, not knowing where it was going, and then it became kind of increasingly funny, and I left in a good mood.
Yeah.
What was your experience similar then, Stella?
Yeah. So, I knew we were going to talk about it, and I was thinking, what was it about the film that was so engaging? Because it was, and I think it was, like you said, the tension of it, and it did a really nice, slow escalation of the madness of the story, and just sort of drip feeding these little tiny beats that just slowly, just wound it up further and further. And and we're not talking about how it ends, but it felt, like I said, it felt really tense, but I thought that the climb up to the top of the tension was really good, and I enjoyed that in a kind of, oh God, what are they going to do next? Oh Christ, he's come back, and
I think it's fair to say there's a home invasion element to the first half of the movie, and that's incredibly tense. Not so much because of what happens, but because you're wondering what will happen.
Yeah. And what happens isn't what you think.
No, it definitely goes in the left field way, but it does so with a great deal of confidence. Do you remember that our friend Steve Timms, who's occasionally appeared on this podcast, he was talking to us about Halloween and Halloween 3, and he wrote a review that we read when we were talking about Suspiria. Yeah. He happened to be next to us in the cinema.
Just right there.
Yeah, and during the first half of this movie, as the home invasion stuff kept twisting and getting more and more tense and more claustrophobic, he was going, "Oh God, oh get it out, oh no!" And
like they could hear him.
He was really drawn into it. And to be honest, what he was saying out loud was just what I was feeling inside through that part of the movie. But the later developments of the movie, while retaining the interest, moved in just enough towards comedy that I was able to relax a little bit. I can't speak for Steve. I don't know if he relaxed at any point.
Doesn't sound like it. Yeah, it went over, I guess, like the lip of being, well, is this gonna just be really horrible, or is it gonna go the other way and get a bit weird and then became funny? Because, and again, without giving it away, the people who were doing the home invasion part of the story, I did not expect them to end up doing what they were doing. It's just like,
no,
why am I now watching, I don't know, QVC?
Yes. Yeah, I was going to make another comparison, but I think QVC is better and probably less of a giveaway. Yeah, I mean, we did talk about on the day how often with Grimmfest you'll go into a movie not quite knowing, because obviously Grimmfest is a horror festival in theory, but also a lot of the films that they feature are on the edge of horror or in the cult film realm.
Yeah.
So you know that there'll be something about them that has made them suitable for selection in a horror festival, but also you don't know what or to what extent. So something horrible is probably going to happen at some point in this movie, but it might be an injury, or it might be there is an amazing monster, or something that, or a special effect creature that's only in it for a few minutes or something, or a weird dream sequence.
Yeah.
Just an offbeat thing like that. So this movie was very much, that added to the tension of this movie, because there wasn't a lot about it overtly that suggested horror.
Yeah.
For the first 20 minutes, for the wedding sequence, for instance, I kept thinking, is something horrible going to happen? Is somebody going to get shot suddenly? Is somebody going to get stabbed in the face or something? And then that never happens. And they get away from the wedding, which is obviously, although a happy occasion, doesn't seem too happy in the movie.
No.
The relationship between this couple is quite mercenary.
It's quite strained, isn't it, from the start?
Yeah. I mean, they do the fun that they have together as a couple is quite engaging and convincing, like the role playing that they do, but also the bickering that they have as a couple and the being fed up with each other is also quite convincing. It's like it gives you both, and I couldn't help thinking it's probably not great that they're doing this on their wedding night. Maybe 5 years into the marriage.
Yeah.
You couldn't be swinging between these things.
Well, that's what I've got written here, that, I thought it was very well acted. I think everyone was convincing. But I guess so I enjoyed the film. It was like I said, it had a good pace. I liked the tension, all that stuff. But I don't think I actually cared about any of the characters, because it was clear that it was all, it was all downhill from the wedding day, really, wasn't it? And I wasn't really bothered about it. And because you've got our couple who they seemed to be into each other, but there did seem to be some element of like marriage of convenience a little bit in there. And yeah, I thought they were both treating each other pretty shoddily for varying reasons. And I was just like, well, I'm not really bothered if either they make it or they make it as a couple. So I don't know. I wonder if it would have been better and maybe not better. I'm not a filmmaker. Where's my film? I haven't got one. But to just make me want to root for them a little bit more if they were perhaps a little bit nicer to each other. Because it was like, well, maybe I don't think you. Because I was just thinking, I don't think they should have got married. Like they were my friends and I know them. But I don't think you're right for each other.
I mean, thinking about it, I don't think I found them particularly sympathetic until the other characters, the home invader characters, began their invasion stuff, because they were so horrible that you felt
they
like
were really grotesque, weren't they?
This couple doesn't deserve this, so then you become on their side. But until that, they're quite unlikable. And all the characters in this movie are quite privileged, even though they might have come from difficult backgrounds. Actually, that's not true. The invaders are not privileged, but also they're not sympathetic. But the two main characters, I think there's a suggestion that the male character has come from a very difficult childhood, but he's kind of moved beyond that now, and he's a writer and has a book coming out, and he's seeming to be in two minds about that, and that in itself is not very sympathetic. You don't really know why.
Yeah, it's not really clear. I kind of got the impression that I think maybe that the character in his book was based on his dad, and that perhaps he'd not quite squared that with his dad.
Right.
Because the dad wasn't invited to the wedding.
Yes.
And he wasn't sure about the book coming out because he felt that his dad was going to be upset. And maybe his dad, maybe done some dodgy stuff, and he was using him as a basis for a character to tell a story of, this is what it's like, in the ghetto or whatever. That's the impression that I got, and he wasn't on the best terms with his dad, and that's why he was having second thoughts about the book. But it was her and her family that had given him the opportunity to release the book. I think it's like publishing company is the family or something.
Yeah, her auntie or something is the publisher, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I did find that stuff quite involving. Like you said, the performances are very good, but once the home invasion stuff starts, you forget about all that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's out the window straight away.
It's not really addressed again in the movie, which may or may not be a flaw. I don't think it really is, because it's only bothering me now a week later. I'm only thinking about it. I enjoyed the movie very much. I think the only things that bothered me on first viewing were the fact that there are a couple of kind of bits of violence or action moments later in the movie that are shot in a weird way where you can't quite see what's happening, and it's confusing at a couple of points. And that maybe the ultimate ending, which we won't give away, of course, is maybe a little bit disappointing, because I think you hope that it will end in a spectacular act of violence or something really satisfying, and it does end in an act of violence, but I would say it's maybe not all that satisfying for me.
Could have been more, yeah. Yeah, so, that brings us back around to the question you were saying before, like what makes this a film for a horror festival? And the big spectacular, bloody violent fight at the end would have been what would do it.
Yes.
Whereas, like you said, that there is an end, but it kind of splutters to a halt a little bit, I think. I think they could have made more of certain props, for instance.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I know what you're getting at there. But I do think it's a very impressive movie, really enjoyable. The performances are really great. The couple are played by Rigo Garay and Ella Ray Peck, and Rigo Garay is one of the writers as well. The script is by the director Chris Skotchdopole. That's one of my favourite surnames, I have to say.
It's a great surname. But
he was writing from a story by himself and Rigo Garay and Larry Fessenden. So I would say the actor is telling a story and a character that he really wanted to tell. And he comes across as very well. All the actors come across as very kind of real and in the moment, and also there's a terrific performance by John Spiridakos, who was actually there at the festival.
He was,
and gave a really fun account of making the movie in New York. And this movie, it's a first-time director. It's a really assured debut for Skotchdopole. There are some established figures behind the scenes. The co-writer Larry Fessenden is one of the producers, and he's done loads of movies that have been considered kind of important, if not widely seen, like cult movies. Like, I think Kim Newman gives Larry Fessenden a whole chapter in his book Nightmare Movies, and I've read the chapter but I haven't seen any of the films. Fessenden turns up as an actor in small roles in a number of movies, so I have seen him. Probably he's in The Brave One, for instance, with Jodie Foster, which was a favourite film of mine from the decade before last, how time goes on. And also, I think one of the producers is Bonnie Timmerman, who is better known as a casting director and has worked in the industry since the late 70s. She cast a number of movies directed by Tony Scott, which might explain why there is an in memoriam to Tony Scott in the credits of this movie.
There we go, yeah.
But it comes from slightly within the American movie establishment, but it's showcasing a lot of strong talent, I think, and it's a really compelling movie and a really accomplished piece of work that I enjoyed. So
it's definitely watchable for sure.
I think I don't know whether Crumbcatcher is a great title. I mean, would it have grabbed you if you'd not? It was our friend Craig who chose this movie to see, so we just went along. I'm not sure I would have chosen Crumbcatcher. I mean, I do think it's funny in the movie when you find out what the Crumbcatcher is, but you can't really say what it is on the poster. So should that have been the title of the movie? I'd not be convinced.
I mean,
that.
I can't think of another one, but
I mean, it is catchy and trips off the tongue.
Yeah,
sometimes
I think
that's all you
in
want.
hindsight, with the reveal of what it is, I think it's like it's that moment that tips the film out of its being incredibly tense phase.
Right, yeah.
That's when it's just like, oh, right, I see.
This is, when you realise, this is bonkers.
Yeah. So maybe the title should stay as it is. Not that they're going to change it. But...
No, not now.
It's too late now.
The last thing I want to say about the movie, without giving anything else away, is that there are things in it that I think back to, particularly lines of dialogue, and I still laugh. We were laughing kind of all day at certain... Yes, I won't, don't worry. You know what I'm getting at.
I do, don't say it.
But no, I certainly won't. But it's cherishable when a movie leaves you with things like that you can just retrieve to put a smile on your face.
I'd erased it and now you've brought it back.
Oh, well, maybe that's my issue then. Sorry. But there we go. Crumbcatcher, overall an enjoyable one, I think. So let's move on to the second film that we saw, which is called Delivery Run. There isn't a trailer for this one that I can find. It is a very recent production. It's only just... I think Grimmfest had it for its world premiere.
That was a premiere, yeah. Woo!
Yeah, there's very little online for it. We were privileged to be among the first people to see it. Because there's no trailer, I'll just have to summarise it now. IMDb summarises the plot of Delivery Run as: a food delivery driver gets caught in a deadly chase in the icy Minnesota wilderness, pursued by a crazed snowplow driver for unknown reasons, facing life-threatening situations and forced to outsmart his relentless pursuer alone. To add a bit more detail to that, I think we should mention that he's also being pursued by criminals that he owes money to at the same time. So when I heard that this movie is basically Duel with a snowplow, I was all in.
So that's the one for me.
I thought that sounds kind of ridiculous, and I was determined to watch it. And I didn't just watch the film, I stayed behind afterwards. You had to leave early. You saw the whole film, but you left before the Q&A.
Yeah.
I saw the Q&A with the director and some of the cast, and it really emphasised or underlined the impressiveness of the production. I thought it was a good-looking film while I watched it, and a good-sounding film. But then hearing from the director that it was filmed in 13 days on a budget of, I think he said, $350,000.
That's brilliant.
It's absolutely amazing, quite frankly. It was filmed, it's set in Minnesota, but was filmed in Finland. And we could talk about how effective Finland was as a setting. But I think doing that kind of movie in that short time is impressive, no matter where you do it. The director, Joey Palmroos, really knows what he's doing. And it wasn't his debut movie. I think he said he'd done one feature before, which was a Western, and I'd like to see that. I don't know where they filmed that one, but I think he can get the best out of any location.
Absolutely.
But the sad thing is, despite this, I didn't really enjoy the movie, and I think a lot of that comes down to the script, which is also by Joey Palmroos. So I would say, great director, please get somebody else to write scripts for you.
Yes, that's what I've got written here. Twice is the word script. Once I've underlined it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't stay for the Q&A because I had to dash home, but I didn't know that the budget was so low, and what he's achieved on that budget in terms of visuals is fantastic. There's a lot of use made of light and shadow. It's really beautifully put together. So all of those things are fine. I think the actual basic story was fine. So it struck me this, and I've written the word cycle here. And when I say cycle, I can only actually think of another film. So maybe 2 isn't a cycle, but it feels like there's been and maybe I know of more of them, but I've just not seen them. A little cycle of films that are about Uber drivers, delivery drivers, because that's a common, particularly a job for young people that puts them in that slasher situation. Yeah,
it's a very modern key in to this kind of genre.
So there was Spree, which was on Netflix, which has gone off Netflix, which I don't really know why, and that was about essentially an Uber driver going around killing his passengers. There's Cam Girls, that is still on Netflix, that is essentially about someone, a lass doing like an OnlyFans type of thing, and she gets, the situation goes awry in a slasher fashion. So, it feels like it's part of this cycle of tapping into these very modern ways of earning a bit of cash, Yeah. And then I liked sort of putting the dual storyline of being chased by a marauding, faceless, scary big vehicle. I like the idea of putting that against the backdrop of a delivery driver, a Deliveroo driver for all intents and purposes. Or Uber Eats or Just Eat or any of those things, not sponsored. So I did really like that element, and it's just the script was just really clunky at times, and it kind of pulled you out of it a bit.
Yes, I feel like this is what I thought the problem was. I feel like if you wanted to come up with a soundbite for this movie, you might say that it's Duel meets Fargo.
Yeah.
Because it's the road thriller, but it's also a crime movie, sort of a crime comedy set in Minnesota with those very distinctive Minnesota accents.
The accents.
And the accents are maybe not that convincing. We did find out in the Q&A, which I wasn't expecting, that most of the actors were actually British.
Oh, right. Well, maybe that explains the accents weren't all great. But I can't do accents.
They were certainly not all consistent.
Mm-hmm.
They sounded like, some of them, they sounded like they were from different parts of America, which maybe is what you'll get when you cast actors not from the area that your film is set in. But maybe it's a little bit reductive or a little bit stereotypical of me to immediately go to Fargo as a touchstone because it's the only other crime thriller I can think of set in Minnesota. So maybe that's not a fair comparison. But I think either way, though, you have the dual track of the movie. Well, but there's a double meaning there, isn't there? Mm-hmm. It's a twin track movie. It's a dual track movie. It is dual to some extent, but it keeps diverting to advance the crime thriller plot. The character is delivering, and he'll go out on a delivery and encounter the snowplow, and there'll be a tense encounter. And then he'll have to drop off a delivery somewhere, or he'll go and meet someone. So that becomes a different movie. And then he goes back on the road, and the snowplow reappears, and it becomes that movie again. Whereas in Duel, the film Duel, it doesn't divert from the single plot of the truck, and therefore the tension builds and continues to build. Whereas in this movie, it goes tense, stop, tense, stop, and after a bit, I just found that quite frustrating. And it also meant that because it was like two different movies stuck together, the bits of each movie that were good didn't really have the space to develop.
Yeah.
Like I think maybe the best character in the film was Rebecca, who's the kind of loan shark gangster person, but she's only actually in about 3 scenes, and it feels like she's going to be used in a clever way that the two plots will integrate together in a surprising way, but they just don't. And what ultimately happens is the movie just goes back to being Duel at the end, and you even said, what's the difference? Because the ultimate resolution of that is very like what happens in Duel.
Yeah, it was almost like the Rebecca character, she just happened to be there while the duel was going on, or the other way around. The duel storyline was going on whilst he happened to be having trouble with a loan shark. Like they didn't come together at all. The other thing I've written down is, so again, coming back to the, what makes these films suitable for a horror film festival. And it seemed to me that, you've got the truck, the snowplow, as the menace, the faceless menace of the film. Yeah. But then there was a slasher sequence, right? Where the cop got murdered.
Yes.
And I missed it. I went to the bathroom. Yeah. So I missed what I would have said, there's your horror sequence. Yes. But I was in the bathroom.
Although, to be fair, there were a couple of other slasher sequences later in the movie that I think you did see. And it does a thing again, which Duel doesn't do, which is that there are points where the driver gets out the truck and there is an on-foot confrontation, and some people are killed by the truck driver in person, not using the truck.
Not using the truck. What weapon does he have?
It's an axe, I think, or a snow pickaxe or something.
Yeah. I think it lost my attention a little bit.
Right. So in those bits, it's kind of becoming a third movie again, and there are hints that it's going to go in certain directions, which it then never does. So I found it quite frustrating. I think ultimately the thing which brings it all down is the script, the structure of the script, because I think the performances have the potential to be quite good. Like Alexander, I keep wanting to call the lead actor, Alexander Armstrong, who is the host of Pointless.
So he's a TV person.
But it's not. It's Alexander Arnold. like I say, his performance is potentially very good as a kind of slacker anti-hero comedy.
Yeah, I liked him. See, I wanted him to get away. I liked him.
Yeah.
I wanted him to survive.
Yeah, he was sympathetic. And I wouldn't have guessed that he was English or British at all. But the
Could have done
script-
without the fish.
Yeah, the fish thing. The subplot about him always trying to protect his goldfish in a bag was a kind of odd thing that I feel like if you have something that odd in a movie, you should do something really big with it. And he doesn't really ever do anything with it. And there's also things like the script doesn't allow the character to develop in a way that supports the actor. So Alexander Armstrong, I've done it there. Alexander Arnold. He spends the whole movie kind of whimpering because he's being chased by this evil psycho in a truck, and he's kind of shouting at the truck and driving and doing scared driving acting.
Yeah.
And he's kind of stuck on that level throughout the movie, and then even by the end of the movie, he's shouting at the truck driver, "Just leave me alone!" It's like, no, that's the kind of thing he should have said near the beginning of the film. The guy's clearly not going to leave you alone.
Yeah.
He's killed about 15 people trying to kill you. He clearly is working to some kind of objective here. And there's also things like the character has... Firstly, he gets arrested halfway through the movie, so he's driving while handcuffed, which I'm not even sure is really possible.
I don't think that's possible, but bear in mind I don't drive, so
No,
what do I know?
Maybe I should have a go. But also there's the thing about...
That's something you should do in the first year since you've passed.
Yes, just get me... Well, I happen to have a pair of handcuffs, but I can't... Anyway, that's not something I can admit to. But, there's a plot point that his shoelaces are never tied.
Oh, yeah.
Because Rebecca, in the first scene where she says, "You owe me some money," and that kind of sets everything in motion, she says to him, "Tie your shoelaces, you idiot." But he never does, to the extent that... And the thing is, the fact that he's not tied his shoelaces does pay off. There is something that happens at the very end of the film that requires his shoes to be untied, and that's great. But it also... Because the payoff, the setup is at the beginning of the movie and the payoff is at the end, it requires him to spend the entire film with untied shoes.
It's a long time.
For no reason, and it just makes him look like a bit of an idiot. Like, has he not... Somebody's pointed it out to his face. Your shoes are untied, you should tie them. They're a hazard. And he just doesn't. And I think... So it's things like that. A script editor could have said, yeah, move the shoelaces tied thing to the last 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, because he has a run-in with Rebecca again. So the shoelaces could have happened at that run-in with Rebecca rather than the first one.
Yeah.
And that would have moved it up the film.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'd forgot the importance of the shoelaces.
But
we had been in the pub for a while, so...
Well, indeed, yes. So a lot of this movie's problems, I think, could have been solved by just restructuring the script and kind of capitalising on the things that it does have, because it has some good ideas and it does well made, really impressive. I will watch Joey Palmroos' next film, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true. It's one to keep an eye on for sure, because I did enjoy it while I watched it. I did laugh at bits that weren't probably meant to be funny. So she's like, "Ugh, no." But yeah,
yes, me
you
too.
You can't really argue with being chased by a menacing snowplow. That's all right.
Yeah, me and you both love Duel. I will always be happy to watch a movie that tries to be Duel.
Yeah.
I think the lesson of this movie, which it was very sincerely intended by Joey Palmroos to be a homage to Duel, he described it as such, a love letter to Duel, he said.
Yeah. And that's fair.
I think but it's a very difficult challenge to recreate a movie that was already so straightforward and simple.
Yeah.
And you've got to be very careful with it. And I think this movie is too similar to it in some ways, but also diverts too much from it in other ways.
Yeah, like we didn't actually get enough of that.
No.
Of the dualness of the snowplow. To be fair, like I would have, like you said before, felt like it was trying to be two films. So either just do duel with a snowplow, or have a kid running around, trying to find, what was it, like 10 grand or something in 6 hours or whatever. Something like that.
Which is the plot of a movie. That's enough plot for a movie.
Yeah.
So
anyway, yeah.
But it did add up to another enjoyable time at Grimmfest.
Yeah, it's always
once
fun.
Again. It's always good to go along there with you, Stella. And
yeah,
I think this was a good one, and I'm glad to be back there in person.
Yeah.
For the first time for me since pre-pandemic.
Since the before times.
So, good heavens. So, and I'm glad they're still going. It's just
oh yeah, God.
What would we do without them? God bless them. And all these new filmmakers who they're supporting. It's fantastic. But those were our two little reviews of the movies we saw this year. Crumb, which I think we both liked, and Delivery Run, which we were both very critical of. But worth seeing either way. And I would say let's definitely keep an eye out for Joey Palmroos for whatever he does next. Maybe I'll send him a script. Under a different name, so that he doesn't know it's that Gits from that podcast.
I need the Lurking Gits, though.
Yes. Jeez. Another one. Yes. Indeed, that's me. The Lurking Gits. The classic podcast name. Anyway, listeners, this has been the Lurking Gits once again. I mean, and now the podcast starts. That brings us to the end of this episode. In the next episode, we'll be talking about Nigel Kneale's Quatermass from 1979, sometimes known as the Quatermass Conclusion, and we'll be discussing its many and various forms. We'll be doing that with our old friends, the acclaimed horror author Simon Clarke and the spectacular podcaster Spider Dan. And that episode is already available on our Patreon page if you are a Patreon supporter at the £2 a month level. There will be a link in the show notes. But listener, thank you very much for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed it. Stella, thank you so much for your conversation and your company.
Thank you.
It's been fun chewing over that, and it was great to experience Grimmfest with you and to just reflect back on it. But for now, thank you, dear listener, and bye-bye!
Bye!
You have been listening to And Now the Podcast Starts, an Ambisol podcast, presented by Dr. Stella Gaynor and T.D. Velasquez. Special thanks to Greg Hume for our original theme music. Our original artwork is by Kirsty Warrow. Please search One Crow Left on Instagram, Etsy, or Redbubble to see and purchase more of Kirsty's work. All clips from films, TV shows, trailers, and musical works are used for the purposes of criticism in the spirit of fair use as defined in the US law and fair dealing as defined in the laws of Commonwealth nations. No copyright infringement is intended. Please visit our home on the web, andnowpodcast.com, for more content and contact details. You can follow us on Mastodon, Blue Sky, and even Twitter, which we refuse to call X. It's an insult. X, the unknown. Our handle for each is @andnowpodcast. Meanwhile, Threads and Instagram users need simply search @andnowpodcast. On Facebook, search @andnowpod. If you'd like to donate to help us with the costs of making the podcast, please visit patreon.com/andnowpodcast. Donors get early access to upcoming content and other exclusives. This podcast was produced and released by Ambidextrous Solutions Limited. And now the podcast stops.